Something unexpected happens to a 35-year-old Tenno. He went to work in the morning like any ordinary guy, but while coming back he is run over by a truck. Suddenly everything goes blank, and with him 4 other people also get hit. Those 4 individuals are particularly glowing, unlike Tenno. Suddenly he hears a frantic voice depicting sheer confusion. The voice wails that if something is not done then it is going to fail. The summoning is incomplete and it might send all these 5 brave heroes back to their original world. Tenno wonders whom the voice is referring to. According to him, the brave heroes are main characters in those comic book worlds that his sister is addicted to. Suddenly someone yells very loudly, and poor Tenno is so puzzled because he cannot see anyone, yet the voice is really deafening. He is more confused when he finds out that the other 4 people have suddenly vanished. The voice continues to complain that they have been found, and they don't know what to do anymore. He realizes that there are 2 invisible people talking, and the best part is both of them didn't notice Tenno. Tenno deciphers from the conversation that he was not supposed to be the part of all this. One voice reprimands the other that even though it is known that it's really a bad idea to summon because it disrupts the order of the world, still that person used their summoning skills even if they are a novice. Suddenly Tenno begins to fall and lands at a place that seems like a deep forest. Tenno feels tired and his body feels sluggish. He wonders where he is actually. He looks around and feels depressed looking at this dark and gloomy place. He wonders that if this isn't the afterlife, then where he is actually, because from what he has heard earlier he got caught up in some hero summoning ritual. He remembers how his sister used to love those heroes summoned into another world type comics. Tenno wonders whether he can ever return home. At first Tenno yells in frustration. After feeling a little pacified, he decides to think calmly and remembers that demons and magic are a part of other worlds. Tenno is a little worried because a while ago he screamed really loudly, but thank goodness nothing appears. Tenno feels creepy and it seems to him that something has been clinging to him ever since he woke up. Gradually it is moving into his body. He wants to ask someone for help, but all he can see is a whole lot of trees. He thinks that the forest is cursed. This is why he is feeling so exhausted and uncomfortable. Something whispers breezily to him that all the evil will be gone if the purification spell is casted. Tenno shrugs off that feeling, and because he is not certain whether magic and spirits even exist over here, he suddenly feels a change and his body feels lighter. He wonders whether his body is recovering. He blurts out that maybe this is purification. He smiles with deep satisfaction that at last he was able to cast a purification spell, and all that black haze is fading away. It is confirmed to Tenno that an evil spirit was lingering over him and he is able to cast magic, something quite different from reality. Tenno is lost in his thoughts when he hears footsteps and a sound of teeth clenching together sharply. To his horror he encounters a huge animal and wonders whether it is a dog or a wolf. Poor Tenno doesn't know what to do, as fighting the beast would be reckless. He decides to quietly and slowly walk away, as he knows that the beast will chase him if he starts running. But as he takes small steps, the beast also imitates him and takes a deliberate step. The beast snarls at him, and as a reaction Tenno also screams in sheer terror. The beast falls silent, and to his surprise stumbles and falls to the ground. Tenno realizes that even the beast is suffering from the black haze, as the poor thing tries to fumble uncomfortably and yelps in agony. Although Tenno is super terrified of that wolf, he knows that he has to save it. Tenno has always been an animal lover, so he decides to use the purification magic that he used on himself a while ago. Tenno chants purification and hesitantly touches the beast. Instantly the magic works and that dark aura around that beast disappears immediately. So when the beast is pacified, Tenno finds it cute and has a sudden urge to fluff its fur. He feels that the beast has some dirt on it, even though the Japanese people prefer cleanliness. Nevertheless, he finds the beast less daunting than before. The beast begins to do somersaults and rolls over in front of Tenno, but Tenno decides to clean it before touching it. He then chants cleanse, and in no time the wolf is spick and span like an old maid's house. The wolf stretches itself and begins to walk away, but Tenno stops him from behind. The wolf turns around and begins to chase Tenno, who decides to run for his life. Meanwhile, the wolf secretly ponders that Tenno doesn't seem like an ordinary man. 200 years ago, this deep and dark forest got shrouded in darkness. It was not easy, but mankind managed to pull it off some way or other. And as the forest got swallowed by darkness, the weaker ones got eliminated, whereas the stronger ones survived. The story is being narrated by that same wolf, and he calls himself King Fenrir, who has been watching this forest for the last 200 years and has witnessed countless deaths. His own magic power was strong enough to not get swallowed by the darkness for a while. He then used some purification magic to ward off the darkness from taking over him, but that was temporary. Now chanting spells require magic, so by using a purification spell repeatedly depletes his magic at a much faster pace. He fears that at this rate he won't be able to survive for long. But then a fire of revenge ignites inside him against humans, and he vows to slaughter every one of them before he perishes. That day too he smelled a human, and his every instinct led him to kill that two-legged animal at every cost. He then spotted Tenno, but before he could attack him he felt so weak as the darkness was swallowing him, and he is about to succumb to unconsciousness when he senses purification magic from Tenno, and thinks that Tenno will suffer from a backlash anytime sooner. Unexpectedly, the King Fenrir is overwhelmed by Tenno's overflowing magic power that seems to spread throughout his body, and is healing him. King Fenrir is stupefied because he has never seen such a precise and bottomless magic. For the first time, King Fenrir has acknowledged a human as his master. In fact, it's more like entertaining a human as his guest. The King Fenrir has no issues in expressing his obedience to Tenno. Meanwhile, Tenno realizes that King Fenrir is not actually chasing him but is running along with him. Soon they climb up a mound with Tenno shrieking in delight, and then they come across a shady cave. King Fenrir motions Tenno to enter that cave. Tenno is reluctant because he is having a bad feeling about it, but still he decides to enter that cave. Tenno uses purification magic before entering, but it doesn't entirely remove the curse. He realizes that the King Fenrir lives in this cave because after a while other Fenrirs begin to appear before him. The Fenrirs growl at the human presence, but King Fenrir forbids them to attack Tenno. It can be seen that many beasts are lying dead because of that dark evil haze, and even Tenno's purification magic doesn't work on them. Tenno decides to make his magic work by hook or by crook. He closes his eyes and begins imagining the curse fading away more strongly this time. This time his magic works, and soon the dark haze slowly begins to vanish away. He then uses cleanse to tidy up the remaining beasts. He notices that of the remaining lot, all are wolves except one, which is a dog. It dawns on Tenno that he can actually communicate with those beasts through telepathy. Tenno spots two more cave openings and asks the King Fenrir whether he knows what to do next. The King Fenrir shakes his head as if to say that he has no idea. Tenno knows that as they will delve deeper, the curse will become stronger, so he creates a barrier around those beasts by using his purification skills multiple times, but he fails to create one. This time he imagines the beasts within a halo of white glowing light and yells barrier. In no time, they all are surrounded by a bright crown of light, and Tenno wonders whether it would protect them from physical attacks as well. He decides to strengthen the barrier so that it is able to repel physical as well as magical attacks. He chants enhance, and in no time they all are walking inside a safe haven. While walking inside the cave, Tenno finds the cave bigger than he thought and wonders what kinds of other magic he can use here. He even tries night vision and clairvoyance, but no luck. Tenno thinks that it is just a matter of recognizing the shape of his surroundings. Tenno chants night vision, spatial awareness with closed eyes, and soon the whole surrounding area is projected in his mind. Tenno then decides to purify every inch of that place by using purification, and then creates a barrier. To their dismay, they spot a huge boulder blocking their way. They hear a sickening thud as if something hit the barrier. Tenno asks the King Fenrir whether there is some sort of curse on the boulder. The beast looks at him as if trying to say, "How am I supposed to know?" Suddenly, to their bewilderment, the rock moves slightly. The King Fenrir begins to growl at the rock, and Tenno wonders whether the rock is alive. He decides to use purification magic, but nothing seems to work as the curse seems to be stronger than his purification spell. He wonders whether he should imagine purifying that rock harder, because up till now he has been picturing the curse to move away rather than totally disappear just like in movies and commercials, but he knows that it won't work on a stiff rock. He reasons that trying to picture something persistent which doesn't come off easily, gets chipped off and vanishes for good. He uses purification again, and this time a bird gets injured and falls on the ground. The poor creature tries to fly but falls down due to injury, and Tenno notices that it is covered in blood. The bird perches on his shoulder, and Tenno ponders that regenerating a wound is difficult. However, he imagines healing the sore cells of the bird and then closing the wound. With the whole procedure in mind, Tenno chants heal and clean. The magic works and bird appears good and gorgeous as new to Tenno relief. The bird begins to peck on his hand cheerfully, and Tenno begins to pat on its head. Tenno decides to take a short break after all that toil. He finds the surrounding barrier a little bizarre, but he is glad it is working. Suddenly the wolves on guard begin to bark, and Tenno comes to know that a black shadow is trying to enter the barrier. He wonders whether the barrier is attacking the shadow. He decides to take it easy for now, but is still curious about one thing. The beasts seem much better to him than they first met. However, he hasn't seen King Fenrir eat anything since the time they have met, and at that time he looked a little dizzy as well. So his next step will be to find a safe haven with ample amounts of food and water. He decides to start with something that is very essential for survival, and that is water. He feels that this cave is one of the best places where he can relax. He thinks that if he is able to purify the whole cave, then he would be able to sleep better. So for this reason he has to remove the black shadow. The fact that it is reacting with the barrier means that it has a source outside. The issue is that he cannot purify the source without knowing what it is. He wonders whether he can use spatial awareness in order to take a glimpse of the whole cave. He finds the shadows too dense to see through. However, he can at least tell there is more space in the cave. Tenno comes to the conclusion that he can only see what is inside the barrier. He anticipates that in order to look beyond the limit, something like farsightedness or clairvoyance would work. He analyzes that he needs a magic that allows him to view the cave from a different perspective. Something that given an aerial view of his current premise like a drone with a video capture. He remembers that watching the aerial footage of the sunset captured by the drones was quite alluring to watch on TV. He imagines all that and suddenly shouts clairvoyance. Instantly a screen appears to his delight. Through the screen he finds out that there is a huge rock mountain which is the actual source of shadow penetrating the barrier. Tenno decides to purify it, imagining that he can cover the whole area. Tenno doesn't know how to reverse a curse, but he wonders whether purifying the shadow makes the curse return to the source. Tenno chants purification along with barrier spells and he suddenly feels something getting released from his body. The desired area is immediately purified to his excitement. An hour later he notices an emerging shadow and wonders about its source. He comes to know that it is coming from the ground. Tenno is thoroughly agitated because now he has to purify the area all over. Maybe he has to go deeper this time. He decides to cover the ground with a barrier. Tenno resolves to drive the curse back to its source. He chants purification and then barrier enhance, and the whole area turns over a new leaf this time. A worn-out Tenno is mentally exhausted rather than physically. He literally has an urge to go home. Suddenly the Fenrir comes closer to him, and Tenno ponders that even though his body weight is hard to handle, his softness always calms him down and regrets being pessimistic. Elsewhere in a grand palace, someone informs the king that something strange has been happening in the palace and there have been sightings of white light from the center of the forest. The king retorts sarcastically that this must be the final struggle of the king of the forest before his death. The king orders the hooded stranger to sacrifice more blood to the magic stone, and then lets out a treacherous chortle. The king has plans to overpower that forest which is the center of the world. He says that those beasts had their strong kings in the forest, but that was a long time ago, so it's almost about time that they will be dead. It can be seen that the brutal king has sacrificed many creatures to feed that ominous magic stone and shamelessly urges his people to be honored to devote their lives to the emperor for this great cause. The king then asks that hooded dark elf about the recent happenings in the forest, as there haven't been any changes in the woods since the last few decades. It is stated that the kingdom of Envel has cast a complex magic eye spell over the entire forest. As a result, many holy beasts have disappeared and the demons are now overflowing in the forest. The king expresses concern as in the last 200 years, no country fought against this, and because of that some countries around the forest have disappeared entirely. The informant tells the king that unfortunately they cannot do anything about it. The elf king is not ready to accept the situation as he is afraid that very soon humans will dominate the whole world and this country will disappear like others. The next morning, Tenno wakes up fresh and cheerful and is delighted to see the blue sky again. He is surprised that King Fenrir hasn't left his side even after all the purification has been done. Tenno inquires with the beast whether he wants to stay with him. Hilariously, the mighty beast purrs like a cuddly kitten, and Tenno remarks with a smile that he doesn't understand King Fenrir at all. Tenno then decides to name King Fenrir. He mentions that the first thing he noticed during their first encounter was his white and silver fur. Tenno decides to name him Koa. He adds that since the other two have the same fur as Koa, he decides to name the female one Soa and the other male one as Hio. The black wolf is named Kiru while the white wolf is named Shin, and the only dog in the pack is named Chai. The little birdie begins to tweet as it wants a name as well, so Tenno decides to call it Karen, since it has a beautiful gradient color in its feathers along with a beautiful voice. After this whole naming venture, Tenno smugly declares that he has a great naming sense, regardless of his sister complaining that he doesn't have a knack with names. Soon he begins to focus on reality. Meanwhile, the pack of beasts are discussing their so-called names graciously bestowed upon them by that human. Koa comments that if it weren't for Tenno their entire Fenrir race would have been wiped out. He adds that the human he looks up to has exceptionally great magical and healing power. In fact, just by staying by his side has given them many benefits. Even Koa himself has recovered his magical powers. Koa declares that all the Fenrirs shall obey Tenno as their lord. King Fenrir then turns to Chai and asks about his opinion. The direwolf replies that since he was given shelter by Koa, so there is no reason for him not to obey his orders. It can be seen that Tenno has mistaken Fenrirs for wolves and a direwolf for a dog. Koa announces that with strength provided to them by the Lord they must do their best. It is then Tenno turns around and asks Koa whether he knows of a place with water. However, the pack is unable to understand what he is trying to point at. Tenno elaborates more, and in no time, Fenrirs and the dire wolf begin to dash forward, each trying his best to help their lord. Soon the beasts lead him towards a strange marshy place, where some strange liquid is bubbling and gurgling to Tenno's astonishment. Tenno wonders whether his purification spell will work on a water so contaminated. Suddenly Tenno begins to feel all dizzy and fatigued. This is where Kuru and Shin come to his rescue and help him stand on his feet. Tenno remarks tearfully that he cannot purify until he heals himself. Still, he feels that using that filthy water isn't feasible and really wishes that they had spring water in the middle of the barrier. Poor Tenno misses that clean and hygienic water in Japan. Soon he begins to chant water multiple times, and to his astonishment water comes out of his hands through magic. Tenno cries in delight that water came out of the palm of his hand when he imagined it. He feels that magic is pretty amazing. He wonders that maybe through this capability he is able to create something he can eat as well. Soon he thrusts his hand forward and yells for a Judon to come out with a soft boiled egg, extra sauce, and with super extra red ginger. His request is greeted with silence, so he coughs with embarrassment and realizes that cooked food is not possible. He decides to call out for ingredients like a huge green cabbage, some chicken meat, and an apple, but to his great disappointment nothing is given to him. It dawns on him that maybe he cannot make things that do not exist in this world. A dejected Tenno tells Kyo that he cannot do anything about food, so they have to keep looking for it. Tenno ponders that if he is going to use that rocky mountain as a base, then he has to secure the whole area around it. He thinks that it would be nice if the trees had nuts and fruits, but he decided not to touch the mushrooms. He then examines and samples the trees around, but disappointingly finds no fruit, nuts, or flowers. He stomps in frustration. If they don't find anything to eat, they will starve for sure. Suddenly the Fenrirs begin to bark, and then suddenly Shin and Kuro run in a particular direction. He turns to Koa for an explanation, but all he does is bark, as if to say that he should wait patiently. Tenno hilariously thinks that although he doesn't understand what Koa is trying to point out, he replies in a cool way. Tenno resumes his food-searching operation, but it is futile and poor Tenno is hungrier with every second. Quite unexpectedly he finds a new cave. He remembers the hole he was in until this morning was very difficult to get out, but he analyzes that this cave seems like a great place to camp out. However, he cannot go inside carelessly. Tenno firstly uses spatial awareness and finds out that the cave is quite wide. Plus it is 3 stories high. Not only that, he also envisions an upward passage and a lot of space underground. He concludes that the cave is the best place to live. Suddenly he hears the other Fenrirs howling. Both Koa and Tenno run outside to find that the beasts have managed to hunt down a gigantic wild boar. Tenno wonders if the wolves brought the whole lot of meat just for him. The wolves howl with affirmation, and Tenno couldn't help noticing that they all are dazzling. Tenno appreciates their efforts because they brought all that precious meat with great pains, so he has no choice but to eat it. He hugs his pets in great anticipation and wonders how he is going to dismantle that boar. Tenno decides to imagine a vacuum cleaner in his mind and plans to clean every nook and corner of that animal corpse by using the purification spell multiple times. He finds the filth persistent, so he resolves to send the curse back to its source. After much toil, the delicious-looking food is prepared. Even the Fenrirs and the direwolf are excited by their lord's efforts. Tenno thinks that the boar is actually a monster and wonders whether King Fenrir Koa is also a monster. Koa begins to howl defensively, and Tenno immediately changes his mind and thinks that Koa is no way a monster, he is super cute. Coming to the boar, he wonders how he can even bite into it. An unfortunate Tenno has no other way but to dismantle the beast all by himself. Koa is staring at him, panting with expectation. But first Tenno has to think of a way to chill the meat so that it doesn't get spoiled. A way to cool it down would be to imagine the cooling effect of a luxurious refrigerator he bought on his payday. Soon he imagines that all and shouts, "Refrigeration!" singing with relief. After the task is done, Tenno heads for draining the blood of the animal. The only problem is that Tenno has an aversion for blood, so he decides to do something about that by using his magic. He resolves to transform the monster's blood into water, but then thinks that it will all dry out, and then he has to take care of the insides as well. After some time he begins to retch out after seeing all those innards. The beasts are greatly puzzled because according to them it would have been so delicious if they had taken the bit of that meat when it was warm. A Fenrir suggests that maybe there is something that displeases the Lord. Meanwhile, Tenno is wondering how he can pull out those blood vessels and internal organs. He decides to pull out the blood vessels first and burn them out. Koa assumes that unlike them, Lord has no claws, fangs or tusks. It would be really hard for him to eat. The others are all ready to carve the meat for Tenno on Koa's orders, but before they could head towards the carcass, Tenno has already set it on fire. Soon the carcass is covered with ash, so Tenno decides to clean it with cleaning magic. Not only that, he also decides to remove the bad odor out of the meat. Tenno has previously cleaned a fish, but he knows that an animal like this has lots of internal organs. He couldn't help imagine the gory brain and eyes. He tries to calm himself that it is only an image imprinted on his mind and chance. Instantaneous movement. The animals begin to drool on the fragrance of a liver, but to their dismay, Tenno sets that delicacy on fire. Tenno ponders that he was able to cool and burn things when he gave it a try, so when it comes to a natural phenomena he can always use magic. He then asks the beasts to move away, as his inside cleaning operation continues. The beasts move away dejectedly as their fine dining material is mercilessly being blown away. Tenno uses wind magic to complete the cleaning process, and also the removal of the skin and tail. Next he takes out a fairly large slab of meat to cook for himself, and finally announces to everyone that the party begins. Koa decides to let those who have caught the prey to dine first. The Fenrirs run wildly towards the carved carcass, and then Chai asks Koa whether he can take a bite of that meat. Koa obliges readily and says they must cooperate with each other until the original bountiful forest returns. Koa states wisely that currently they all share the same destiny, and reminds Chai that he was also once the king of the direwolves. A distressed Chai remarks that he is no king, just a worthless leader as he was unable to protect his friends. Koa hopes that Chai finds his friends soon. Koa tells Chai that now they must start calling themselves by their long-awaited names. Meanwhile, Tenno is continuously burning himself by bringing burnt charcoal in his palms, as he is trying to roast his share of meat. He sighs in dismay because a part of the meat gets burnt just like the innards earlier. This time he decides to place the meat on the stone, and take his time by heating it with infrared radiation. He cooks the meat slowly and gradually, just like one does while barbecuing. The fragrance of resulting charcoaled meat is so alluring that the beasts stop tearing down the raw meat for the time being and begin to drool over the whiff of the cooked meat. Next, Tenno picks up a twig, forks out the meat and takes a bite. He relishes on the juicy flavor when suddenly Karen snatches away a piece, and Tenno comments sarcastically that he didn't know that Karen is a carnivorous. Later, Tenno decides to explore the newly discovered cave to secure it as a base. He finds out that around the area, between the outer surface and the inside of the cave, there doesn't seem to be any particular problem. Also, he doesn't find traces of anyone living in that cave. Tenno, on looking at the high ceiling, resolves to turn the first floor into the main room. If he combines it with where he was yesterday, he would have a 4-story mansion. He deciphers that the first underground layer is so wide and the ceiling is so tall, and it seems to him that this wide space continues all the way to the backside. Soon Tenno spots something sparkling on the backside. But interestingly, there are no signs of life in that part as well. He declares that the underground layer of the cave is safe, but now the problem lies beneath that layer. He then uses his spatial awareness skills and confirms that there is something below. He wonders how long the barrier he created the previous day will last, and thinks that he needs to get a better understanding of magic. He hugs Koa and wails like a child that he doesn't want to check out what is below. Koa licks his face, and this makes Tenno a lot better. Feeling energetic, Tenno leads Koa and others down the lower floor and senses a large amount of that shadowy curse left here. The beasts begin to bark uncontrollably on sensing the curse, and then Tenno chants purification. Tenno realizes that the barrier reacted, and he wonders whether his purification magic failed. However, the place overflows with divine white light and Tenno gets confused because he is unable to see anything or anyone over there. Suddenly, a multi-eyed spider with wings appears in front of him, but Tenno firstly decides to deal with that black shadow and chants purification. The curse is not properly eliminated, so Tenno thinks that it might be seeping out of the ground, so he must purify it properly. In no time, a chief spider along with 20 young ones appear from the black lump. It dawns on Tenno that even in this world bugs exist. He wonders whether this is a monster variant. Tenno remarks that spiders are useful animals, but he isn't even sure whether the creepy crawly is a spider or other insect because it has wings. It is then Koa bows down in front of the spider, and the latter tells him that to have survived all that, this is outstanding. Suddenly the chief spider takes a long leap and lands on Tenno's head. Tenno jumps in fright and creates a commotion, shooing away the insect. The young spiders climb up Chai's back, catching the big direwolf off guard. The wolf begins to dance hilariously, wagging his tail wildly to ward off the tiny tots. Tenno finds them pretty harmless. After looking around, Tenno concludes that even the second layer is pretty spacious, and decides to check out the nooks and corners later. Up till now, Tenno has learnt that in order to make his magic work perfectly, he has to imagine the whole scenario. But this time he decides to imagine nothing, and then cast magic. He chants out aloud, "Fire," and to his astonishment nothing happens. Next, without using any image, he calls out "Water," and yet nothing particular happens. This time he casts the fire magic by properly imagining it, and within seconds his hand catches fire. Next he experiments imagining water and casting the fire magic, and to his delight, a flame of fire appears dancing merrily in the air. Not only that, it moves along with Tenno. He comes to a conclusion that while using new magic, a clear image is necessary. He questions himself that once a word has been linked, does that word take priority? He feels that it would be tiring to imagine it every time, so this is convenient. Unexpectedly, the fire dashes towards a random crack in the cave, and Tenno wonders why there is wind coming from that crack in the rock. He peeks through that crack and finds out that although it is pretty spacious inside, there doesn't seem to be any sort of curse. However, it is too dark to figure out the cave properly, so Tenno chants light and imagines a ball of light. However, a blinding flash of light attacks his and the Fenrir's eyes, blocking their views for some time. Tenno apologizes for overdoing it. He then tunes the spell according to his need and finds it quite tiring. Finally, he manages to create a considerable amount of brightness beyond that crack, and can see sparkling rocks inside the crack and wonder what those rocks are. The Spider King creeps through that crack, and manages to bring a beautiful silver stone to Tenno. Tenno thanks the spider and the latter crawls back to his head, proving that he is the king after all. Chai tries to convey something to Tenno, and the latter exclaims that it seems like a precious rare stone to him, but currently he has no use for it. His indifference makes the bewildered Fenrir's comment that their master didn't care he actually found mithril, the most expensive metal in this world. Koa wonders whether Tenno is even a human. Fully satisfied, Tenno declares the conquest of the Rocky Mountain complete. Later he fumbles through his knapsack, and is disappointed to find a few currency notes and a candy wrapper. He thinks that a snack could have been useful at that time. He plans to look for other humans after securing the base, but currently he wants to straighten up this place so at least it has a good place to sleep. He touches the rough hard rock ground and ponders that he should at least add something on this floor to make one sit comfortably. He imagines the floor being softer and smoother, and in no time the place where he has placed his hand becomes as smooth as an ice rink. Tenno shrieks in delight and begins to smooth out the rock's surface. Instantly the whole place is transformed, with a floor as shiny and smooth as a polished marble floor. The beasts along with Koa are excited and marvel at their lord's capability, but in no time the beasts appear like novice skaters, slipping, sliding, and falling over on the skating rink with terrified expressions. Koa sighs in relief as he almost made a fool out of himself. A baffled Tenno comments that tuning a magic spell is definitely challenging. The chief spider states that he is the one who wears hell's flames, and out at the bottom of the earth, he drags any prey that comes into the lava, and because of this trait, he fears him. He proudly states that those who gaze upon his form are fated to die. The chief spider introduces himself as Tyrrhenia, the Death Keeper, but for some reason he has been reduced to a minuscule demeanor, or has rather shrunk from his usual enormous size. The chief spider has practically used up all his magic to protect his children. With that they managed to survive, or are just lucky. He wonders how such a strong miasma appeared. Tyrrhenia is lost in his thoughts when Koa calls him out. Koa tells him that he recognized Tyrrhenia instantly, but his tiny form surprised him greatly. Tyrrhenia retorts in agitation that Koa must mind his own business. Tyrrhenia then asks Koa, how did the forest become fragrant with magic like before? He also inquires about Tenno, whether he is a notorious human. Koa addresses his concern and assures him that they were owls saved by Tenno's human powers. Tyrrhenia protests that humans were the ones who contaminated the forest in the first place. Koa explains that the quality of Tenno's magic is completely different. He tells Terenia that it is because of this reason that the Fenrir race including him look up to Tenno as their master. Koa warns Terenia that he has no past grievances with his family, but if he turns against their master... His threat is cut short by Terenia, who tells him that he wouldn't dream of doing anything terrible to him, because he has sensed that Tenno has several hundred times more magical power than them at full strength. Moreover, Terenia can see that his magical power is slowly sinking and restoring the forest. Koa is satisfied that Terenia doesn't have any hostile intentions towards Tenno. Koa then asks Terenia to stop his children from teasing Chai. Terenia comments that they are just playing with him. Koa protests that ever since the children moved away from Terenia and swarmed around him, he has completely become frightened. Terenia is surprised because Koa is referring to the direwolf as Chai. Koa tells him excitedly that the master has been gracious enough to name them all, and then he asks Terenia to refer to him as Koa. The spider is awestruck and wants to be named instantly, so when Tenno addresses him as Chief, instantly he honors himself as the Chief. Chief then asks Koa about the last night's lightning strikes, and Koa tells him that he sensed terrifying magical power, and it seemed to him that most likely the humans struck again with some sort of attack. But then Tenno's barrier stopped those ambushes. Chief cannot believe that Tenno is maintaining a barrier that covers the sky, because doing that will sooner or later exhaust one's magic. Koa agrees that even if it were his former self, he wouldn't have been able to maintain it even for a moment. Meanwhile, Tenno has a horrifying thought that there are no more humans in this world. These past days while preparing his house, he tried flying his drone clairvoyance around, but no matter how far he went there was nothing but woods. All he saw were a bunch of different animals without any signs of human dwellings like a road or a house. A hapless Tenno fears that maybe he is stuck in a world where humanity doesn't exist. He drops back in frustration and consoles himself that there is still hope, as he hasn't checked out some of the remote places yet. On the brighter side, the remodeling of his house to change the mood of this place is progressing smoothly. He recalls that after creating that smooth floor recklessly, by repeated trial and error he was able to get the floors and walls to feel nicer. Tenno also made passages to the upper and lower floors by carving out rocks to make staircases. From the outside his house appears like a rocky mountain, but inside he has created artistic staircases that lead to the topmost floor. In all, Tenno has managed to build a 4-story mansion with a 2-story basement. Tenno has designed the whole house in the shape of an arch so that Koa can easily use it as well. Not only that, but all that exposed concrete gives it a cool design. While he is lost in his thoughts, his subjects announce that they have brought food for him. Poor Tenno has no choice but to comply with the hunt and eat method. Another disgusting fact about this method is that as soon as the innards are extracted from a carcass, Koa and the others compete to devour them, and this makes him puke like anything. He realizes that animals usually eat their food raw in order to get their vitamins, so burning it was a bad idea. A distraught Tenno is fed up with eating meat for every meal, and how much he craves fish even if it is a cursed one. Suddenly Koa growls fiercely and heads towards a particular direction. Tenno hears those terrible lightning sounds just like last night, and he finds them quite annoying. He reaches the top of the rocky mountain and uses his clairvoyance spell. Suddenly a window appears in front of him, and it appears to Tenno that the entire forest is covered by a thin layer of curse. He recalls that he saw something like a large lake outside the barrier yesterday, but now there is nothing easily visible. This time Tenno decides to purify everything up to that point, and at the same he will widen the barrier and strengthen it. Tenno wonders whether he can reach the lake from this point. He decides to try it out first by letting his magic flow out. He then tries to imagine stretching a single long thin thread towards the lake. He can sense that it is quite farther than he thought, but he feels like he can make it. In no time the surrounding becomes purified with dazzling white light, and this makes Koa exclaims that his master is using intense magic and any more usage can be dangerous. However, Tenno doesn't pay any heed and imagines expanding the stretched out magic everywhere, covering all the way up to the lake, carefully making sure to enclose as far as the bottom of the earth. Then with full force he chants barrier and purification. Tenno dances with joy as his venture becomes successful, as his magic should have expanded 10 times. Also his body feels somewhat lighter. Koa ponders in awe that there is no match for his lord and he is unrivaled. Tenno feels that the curse mixed in the water is mostly flowing in from the outside, so he can try filtering it out by using the barrier's membrane as a sort of filter. Next he decides to carefully turn into a 3-layer filtration system. It really appears to Tenno that something is casting this curse. He fiercely resolves that until the curse is stopped from the other side, from this moment onwards he will forcefully send the curse that's piled back every day. He then cheerfully makes plans with Koa to go fishing the next day. Meanwhile, at the Invala's kingdom, the first chivalric order's commander, Ganmers, expresses gratitude for another peaceful day. Unexpectedly, 4th Chivalric Order's commander Mislost calls out to Ganmers, signaling his return. Ganmers comments that Mislost has returned early this time. Mislost reasons that a big one didn't even appear. Ganmers inquires that since then no changes have appeared in the forest. Mislost answers that not particularly, but he sure wishes that a monster would come out once in a while. Mislost remarks that the kingdom is protected by the king's powerful barrier anyway, so they are perfectly secure. However, Ganmers has doubts, so Mislost asks him whether he is bothered by the light from the forest. Ganmers explains that a few days ago light spread out in all directions from the center of the forest. But by using a magic stone their king acquired the power to suppress the kings of the forest. But Ganmers is worried because never in his life he has ever heard of such drastic changes, and also the kings of the forests are not mere myths, and it's miraculous that they still have much power left. However, Mislost tries to console Ganmers that everything is okay up till now. He adds that Invelas has been repelling foreign invaders for hundreds of years thanks to the king and the magician's powers, so they must believe in the king and fight. However, Mislost changes the track and says that they still have to be cautious of magic beasts outside the barrier growing stronger. Since the knights barely fight, there is nothing much worth doing. Mislost takes his leave, but something is stuck within Ganmers' mind, and that is the magic stone. It is stated that a complex magic eye spell was established in order to bring what's regarded as the center of the world, which is the forest, under control. All of that is sustained by just one magic stone. The stone is said to be found in an ancient ruin, emitting a strange magical power. There is a rumor that the blood of many magicians who tried to analyze the stone flowed. The king and the court mage who control the power of that stone first stopped their bodies from aging. For hundreds of years they have managed to keep their positions as rulers. Ganmers is a little doubtful because he feels that they might be aging gradually. But ever since he was born it was natural for him to not think about it, but just one single thing is holding up the entire kingdom. So he wonders what the hell is that magic stone. Ganmers is taking a stroll lost in his thoughts when he is perturbed by a large number of elf slaves swaying and stumbling in a queue. He wonders that before realizing it they already made it all the way over here. Suddenly their master whips them harshly and yells at them to move faster and calls them animals. Ganmers comments that it is rather unusual to be walking around with such a large number of slaves. The master is a little baffled when he sees Ganmers but asks him whether he has some business in the slave house. Ganmers reasons that he is just passing by. The master sighs in relief and tells Ganmers that currently even if he wished for slaves, he couldn't deliver because he is running rather low. When Ganmers gives out a puzzled look, the master explains that the day before yesterday, 50 slaves were taken as offerings for the magic stone. So that's why he is running low, because they needed to increase the numbers. The slave master clasps his mouth for saying too much and departs hastily. Soon the 5th Chivalric Order's commander, Gamel, appears in front of Ganmers and comments that it is so rare for the first commander to appear at such a place. Ganmers compliments Gamel for having a new and magnificent sword, even though secretly he feels that Gamel is the #1 battle junkie and Ganmers thinks he is really bad at dealing with guys like Gamel. Gamel boasts that the king bestowed the sword upon him recently. He adds that similar to the king's sword, this is also a magic sword that grows stronger and sharper the more blood it drinks. Gamel reveals that he is about to test his sword on some slaves and is thinking of following the king's example and drinking plenty of their blood. Ganmers irritably warns him to do that in moderation. Gamel turns to the slave master and lauds the lot he has despite the master's repeated warnings that those slaves are for breeding. Gamel mercilessly swings his sword around, beheading many innocent slaves at once. He then chortles ominously, commenting that the sharpness of the blade is amazing. However, he finds it boring, with slave crest making them unresponsive. However, someone advises him to wait and let it absorb the energy. The man is about to disclose a technique when Ganmers believes that the whole kingdom is losing its marbles. Meanwhile, Tenno is sitting on the bank of the lake, lining a fishing rod. He jumps in elation when he is done, though he made it with a vine as he didn't have any thread. Soon he sticks some meat on the end of the line and thrusts it inside the lake. The beasts watch Tenno in amazement as they haven't seen or done this kind of activity before. But gloomily he waits and waits, but not a single fish is trapped by the rod. He decides to purify the curse that is mixed into water, but in vain. So he casts his barrier spell to temporarily seal up the lake and the river downstream. He then closes his eyes and thinks about what he can do in order to clean it. Tenno used a method to make it so that the river upstream gets filtered through the barrier's membrane, but he needs a way to separate a curse out on a wide range. Poor Tenno is distraught as he is unable to think of anything. Tenno explains to Koa that the curse is scattered around everywhere like filth, as though it went through the centrifuge of a washing machine. Suddenly something strikes his mind, that what if he imagines static electricity gathering dust? Tenno decides to give that theory a shot. He imagines applying a layer of static electricity on the lake's surface. Next he yells absorption. In no time his technique works and the curse begins to gather at small points in dark circles. Meanwhile at the Inval's kingdom, the court mage arrives at the point where the magic stone is placed. He states that the previous day somehow the magic stone took on some stress from nearby, so he is really curious about it. The guards assure him that they haven't noticed anything like that. The mage thinks that it's better to be his imagination. Meanwhile Tenno gathers all the small circles of curse into one big one, lifts it up like a pizza dough, and decodes to send it back to its source of origin. He chants return, adding in the amount that has been collected inside the barrier as well. He would imagine returning the curse back to its original source. To his astonishment, the circle begins to move in a whirlwind and flies away. Tenno decides to wait for some time to check whether the animals return. Later he cheerfully returns home for some interior designing. Meanwhile at the Inval's kingdom, the court mage notices a scratch on the magic stone, and within seconds the magic stone lightens up, blaring with dazzling rays that ward off the guards. The court mage looks at the stone anxiously as he observes the scratch on the magic stone getting deeper. At the royal court, the king is tediously listening to the current reports given to him by his informants. The only report he is interested in is that the forest he is interested in is in his hands now. The king inquires whether the additional sacrifices to the magic stone's barrier work that day. He is really interested to know whether the forest is about to fall anytime sooner. He vows with a nasty chuckle that he will squeeze the kings of the forest dry till they are nothing but bones and become the cornerstones of his world. And soon after he will fully destroy that filthy remaining beastman country. Suddenly a panic-stricken soldier appears in front of the king announcing an emergency. All the commanders including Ganrez stare curiously at that soldier, who blurts out that a crack has appeared on the magic stone. The king's attendant asks the soldier whether he hasn't made any mistake because that room has the same barrier as the one covering the country. The guard soldier states that it isn't the barrier that is strange. The room is wrapped in a flash of light for an instant and afterwards, so unmistakably on the stone a crack has appeared. The king's eyes narrow in sheer wrath. He rises and slices down the guard soldier into half, throwing him in a pool of blood. Ganrez purses his lips in sheer contempt as according to him the king slashed that poor soldier without any reason. He knows that everyone here feels the same way, but their faces remain expressionless. Ganrez knows that if he were to criticize the situation, he would most likely share the same fate as that poor slave. The king commands the 4th Chivalric Order's commander Mislos to immediately head towards the forest to investigate the source of the issue. At the forest, Tenno and Koa are chopping up some wood in order to work on their home. Tenno is still grilling meat, but cooking has become a lot easier since he has built himself a stove. The first floor of his house has a kitchen and a dining room and is wide enough for everyone to eat together. His kitchen has a beautiful view of the outside, and this makes cooking feel very nice to Tenno. It can be seen that the beasts have also developed a sudden interest in grilled meat, so everyone wants a piece of it. Tenno notices Chai sitting quietly in a corner and invites him to the little grill party. He wonders why Chai remains so silent all the time. Chai then asks Koa whether he can have some of the grilled meat. The Fenrirs readily include Chai in their group despite his hesitation. Soon meals have become like this in Tenno's heavenly abode, and then he has also made a separate bath for himself by adding water, and then heating it. Before that he has only used the clean spell to wipe off all the dirt from himself, but being a true Japanese, Tenno cannot live without having a proper bath. Next he has also managed to create a much needed toilet for himself because previously whenever he tried going to the bathroom, Koa had always warned him that going to the forest all alone is dangerous, so he used to accompany him in Tenno's moments of solace as well, to Tenno's humiliation. But even when Tenno is using that toilet admiring its wash facility, an automatic cleaning system, an excited Koa enters the bathroom asking what he is up to, and immediately flees on seeing Tenno in his most defenseless forms to his great abashment. Tenno suggests that they must attach a door to each toilet. Later while practicing magic, Tenno notices something unexpected. Previously he thought that the silver ore is hard to handle with magic, but then to his surprise the ore begins to stretch. He wonders how far it can be stretched. Koa watches him in amazement as Tenno passes magic through mithril. Tenno observes that the material has been stretched to a point that light can easily pass through it and it appears like glass. Suddenly he gets an idea to place such thin stretched material on the rock windows just like glass is placed. Next he decides to put some wood flooring as there is plenty of material after all. After much searching he finds a tall and straight tree and recalls that once on TV it was shown that for wood processing drying was essential. However, in reality it takes around several years. But this is where his magic comes handy. First he cuts off the branches and peels off the bark. Soon he cuts the wood into planks by using wind magic, and then he cuts off the base. The wooden planks fall onto each other with a thud, startling Tenno to the point of a heart attack, so next time he vows that he will cut the tree after knocking it down. Next he takes the planks to the front of the house by using the instantaneous movement spell. He uses the same spell to transport the planks onto the 4th floor bedroom and piles them up neatly. Next he decides to do the flooring. Now he does place the planks like normal floorboards, but still there are gaps in between. This is because the board's thickness is inconsistent, and also the planks are too huge and heavy. He knows that by using the instantaneous movement magic spell, he is unable to make minute changes. He is greatly disappointed because somehow his ideal flooring plan has been transformed into a big mess. Also, there is a chance of it getting moldy as the planks are to be laid on a solid floor. He decides to have a change of pace because he is already exhausted. Tenno wishes he has an edge tool to slowly shave those planks. It is pretty hard for him to do that, so he tries making one out of the silver ore. He uses magic to create a stretchy thin sheet out of that ore, and shapes the sheet in the form of the weapon he wants. In order to test its sharpness, he stabs the weapon on a wooden plank, and it easily passes through the plank. Tenno ponders that for a rocky mountain to be that flexible when magic is passed through it, the whole idea is pretty interesting. He wonders if he can make a pot out of that ore. Sometimes Tenno gets so fed up that begins thinking about those things that he really needs. For instance, food apart from meat, not to mention cookware. Also he can place some door hinges on the windows so that they can easily be opened and shut, and also they can be added to the entrance on the 4th floor. Not only that, he also makes some rock figurines out of fun since he hasn't played with clay in such a long time. Now he knows that the rock itself is very shiny, but he decides to create such figurines in which only their eyes glow. The next morning, Tenno wakes up early and decides to let Koa sleep for some time. When he awakes he gets the shock of his life when he sees the floorboards placed neatly one after another without any gaps. Not only that, but the foundation is also placed neatly beneath those boards. Tenno gets a bolt from the blue when he witnesses the rock figurines he made last night carrying the wooden planks and marching forward in a well-organized queue, guided by their leader. It seems as if they are trained construction workers instead of some rock dolls. Even the Fenrirs are awoken by the noise and watch the whole scenario in sheer wonderment. Koa turns towards Tenno, who shrugs as if he has no idea what is going on. Tenno states that there are 9 dolls that he created, but how are they able to move? It is then he recalls that while making them he was thinking about a fairy tale where elves would help make shoes in the middle of the night. And then Tenno wished longingly that the flooring should be finished by the time he woke up in the morning. It strikes on Tenno that just because he imagined a fairy tale while making those dolls, the magic created those dolls into fairy tale characters. He then picks up a doll which was the last one he made, and that is the only one not working. The reason is that when he created it, he had no image in his mind. Suddenly Tenno yells at the dolls to stop working and assemble. The dolls immediately obey, rush towards their original space and line up neatly. This makes Tenno realize that the dolls actually obey orders. Suddenly he lifts up the doll that has been lying lifeless up till now, and commands it to move since it is a helper robot. The doll wobbles and stumbles but manages to stand upright, and then joins others in the queue. Tenno cheerfully assigns the job of floor making to his self-created workforce, who readily resume their work. Tenno watches them with great satisfaction as the dolls work quickly, neatly, and with ease. Hilariously, the beasts are fretting over in terror as they think that the dolls are actually stone golems, and one of them points out to Koa that aren't these the same weapons used by the humans to attack the forest. A frantic Koa tries to calm down his clan. Tenno watches in amusement as for some reason Koa and the others were wary of the stone dolls for a while, but he has crossed his fingers that someday they all will get along.